Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of The Right View. Before we get started tonight, let's go over a couple of videos, see what's going on out there in the world. Here we go.
I think the important message is the division coming up at our own Thanksgiving tables. I think that there'll be a lot of families where some people go into the room, the dinner table, and they go, I better not say certain things. Better not say certain things because it's going to offend certain people, the Trumpies.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chris Matthews. We're the ones offended, the Trumpies? I don't know where this guy has been. No, we have been offended so many times and we don't even let it bother us. You know what? It's like water off a duck's back with us. We have been called Nazis. We've been called fascists. We've been called Hitler. We've been called racist. We've been called all the names in the book. And we still keep moving forward because you know why? Sometimes you got to just move on with life. And you know how you know people who have jobs? That's what they do. We all have jobs out there, the Trumpies. So we're just going to move on. I would say it's on the other side of the aisle. We're always willing to sit down and engage with somebody. It's the crazies on the left who excommunicate their entire family if they voted for Trump or even lean slightly conservative. So you may want to check with some of your friends, Chris, before you go down that path. Everyone is welcome at our Thanksgiving table, no matter how you voted. And I think a lot of conservatives out there would echo that sentiment. You know why? Because we want to be able to sit down and communicate and we want to have a conversation. That's how this country was founded. That's how we should continue. And you know what? If we stop talking to one another, that's going to lead to bigger and bigger problems. So sit down for Thanksgiving with your family. My gosh, that's absolutely nuts, Chris. But I mean, I guess what do we expect?
You mentioned Lee Zeldin there. He's now a cabinet secretary. He responded and said it was actually Dr. Jeffrey Epstein, who's a doctor that doesn't have any relation to the convicted sex trafficker. Unfortunate for that doctor, but that is who donated to a prior campaign of his. Do you want to correct the record on the people?
Listen, I never said that it was that Jeffrey Epstein. Just so that people understand, when you make a donation, your picture is not there. And because they decided to spring this on us in real time, I wanted the Republicans to think about what could potentially happen because I knew that they didn't even try to go through the FEC. So my team, what they did is they Googled. And that is specifically why I said a Jeffrey Epstein. Unlike Republicans, I at least don't go out and just tell lies. Because it was not the same one, that's fine. But when Lee Zeldin had something to say, all he had to say was it was a Jeffrey Epstein. He admitted that he did receive donations from a Jeffrey Epstein, so at least I wasn't trying to mislead people. Now, have I dug in to find out who this doctor is? I have not. So I will trust and take what he says is that it wasn't that Jeffrey Epstein, but I was not attempting to mislead anybody. I literally had maybe 20 minutes before I had to do that debate.
Yeah, but people might sit there and say, well, you're trying to make it sound like he took money from...
I did not know.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, that's what you call a word salad. That's what you call a Kamala Harris style word salad. Absolutely nothing of any substance or any sense that just came out of Jasmine Crockett's mouth there. Yes, she was fully trying to insinuate that Lee Zeldin took money from the Jeffrey Epstein. Jazzy, give me a break on this one. She knows it. She got caught. I'm obviously trying to peddle a lie and just try to pass something off that wasn't even there. And so this is what happens. You got to face it and you got to deal with it head on. But she wasn't even willing to admit that. I said a Jeffrey Epstein, not the. What other Jeffrey Epstein, Jasmine Crockett, is anyone talking about? Would ever matter having donated to someone's campaign? As it turns out, there are some Democrats who I know got some money from Jeffrey Epstein, who were inviting him to their fundraising events. Like, Hakeem Jeffries, for example, had an invitation extended from his campaign to Jeffrey Epstein to attend a campaign event. But I digress. We'll go with what you said there, and that you were not insinuating in any way that Lee Zeldin took money from Jeffrey Epstein. Okay.
There's no party left of center, real party for political assassination. And yet right of center, very prominent people, from the president and Elon on down, treated it like the first shot fired in the Civil War. Totally irresponsible, totally dishonest. I mean, these people were arsonists pretending to be firefighters. I mean, Elon jumped on X within minutes before Kirk was declared dead, certainly before his killer was caught. It's beyond reckless. I mean, it's just sociopathic. It's just he is just flinging matches into a landscape that has been just soaked in gasoline. And the soaking has been done mostly by Trump and Trumpism and just the grifters.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. Was it Donald Trump who called Charlie Kirk a fascist? Was it Donald Trump who called Charlie Kirk a Nazi, a racist, homophobic, misogynist? All of the horrific labels and terms that got thrown Charlie Kirk's way. Terms that elicit a visceral response in people, a physical response in a lot of senses, and allude to really awful things. And if anyone is truly a Nazi or Hitler or any of those things, they're a horrible person. And the world is better off without people like that in it. So when you say that Donald Trump is the one who did that, show me where he called Charlie Kirk any of those names. I'll show you a whole slew of videos and online content where a lot of folks on the left call Charlie Kirk those names. I don't even know how to make sense of any of that. You know, we, again, are the party who continues, as Charlie was doing when he was assassinated in cold blood, to want to communicate, to sit down with people with opposing viewpoints and say, hey, let's talk. Why don't you give me what it is, you think on this topic, and I'll give you back what I think. And maybe we can have a meeting of the minds, and maybe we can come together, again, how our country was intended to be. That is reckless. That is irresponsible. That kind of talk now on the other side of this, just completely insane. But that's what these people do. Their inability to look in the mirror and recognize that you have been part of the problem is part of the problem. So I guess we shouldn't expect anything less.
Girls spend a lot more time on social media than boys. Liberal girls spend a lot more time than conservative girls. That didn't used to be the case, but as we get into the 2010s, when everything gets so politicized, we get into the Great Awakening, we get into the polarization, the illiberalism that is, that you and I have really been, writing about and talking about for a long time. As we get into the era, the feeds of the liberal girls gets much more taken over by how terrible the world is, everything's sexist, you're not going to get ahead. And this is like the greatest era of female progress that we're going through. But liberal girls are sort of caught in a set of disempowering ideas. And my previous book, The Coddling the American Mind, with Greg Lukianoff, was exactly about that. Here's 3 terrible, terrible ideas. And if you believe them, you're almost guaranteed to be a failure in life. It's what doesn't kill you makes you weaker. Always trust your feelings. And life is a battle between good people and evil people. And for liberal girls, a lot of them got sucked into that kind of mindset. And it happened on Tumblr in 2013. That was the transition point when certain ideas were developed. So that's when girls' mental health takes a tumble. If you graph out liberal boys and liberal girls and conservative boys and conservative girls, it's the liberal girls who really rise first and fastest on depression. And the conservative boys are not up that much. So everyone is worse off, but being conservative seems to root you. You're not as easily pushed into this crazy world. Being in a religious family seems to root you, and those two things seem to be protective.
Yeah, I would heavily agree with all of that, which is why I think it's so important that this future generation coming up is told the truth, is told that men can't get pregnant, is told that, you know what, you might feel like you want a puppy in a safe space. That's fine. But you're going to get out in the real world and it's going to slap you in the face. And you don't get a puppy in a safe space in the real world. You're not a furry. Okay. Put the litter boxes away. Like all of this nonsense that we've allowed these kids just to run with and just say like, yeah, if you feel it, you should go with it. That's ridiculous. That is wrong. And it is so sad to see how many people have been negatively impacted by this victim mentality that has been really aggressively infiltrating certainly our youth, but entire parts of our population for sure. You look at minority populations in this country and the idea that you're a victim, that you can never get ahead, that's what the mainstream media and the Democrats have tried to drill into so many people. It is a lie. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And so when you're told time and time again, you can't, no matter what, you'll never get ahead because you're a woman or you're this or you're that. It's the truth. If you think that you can do it, guess what? You absolutely can. And there is no better country in the entire world in which you can do anything you want other than right here in the United States of America. The only limiting factors you have in America is how hard you're willing to work and how big your imagination is. Take that and run with it right here in this country. So how detrimental to an entire population of people, to an entire generation of young Americans that we've tried to infiltrate them with this sort of ideology and mentality to just beat them down, to just say, don't even try it, don't even bother. How bad is that going to be for our country one day? Great job. Everybody out there who thought this was a good idea, way to go. We're going to have an entire generation of Americans at some point who just says, oh, I'm too weak, I can't do it, I'll give up, I'll go with my emotions here. Ask the greatest generation, the men and women who lived through World War II. Did they even have a choice in the matter? They didn't. And guess what? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Ask anybody in our family. Ask Donald J. Trump about that, okay? It's absolutely sad to see that sort of thing, but it doesn't surprise me. So this is more of a reason why I will continue to try to keep my kids off of any sort of devices and social media as long as humanly possible. They have that wait till 8 or wait till 8th that's up at the schools. I'm going to say wait longer than that. Wait as long as you possibly can because it is poison for young minds. It's hard enough as an adult to rationalize some of the crazy stuff that's out there on social media, the way people who hide behind screens will talk to you. You think that a 12 and 13-year-old mind can grasp any of that and actually process it in any sort of a responsible way? Forget it. I'm going to say as long as humanly possible, I'm going to try to keep my kids off of any device and social media because it's just, I can't think of anything good that comes out of any of it. Tonight, we're joined by the Daily Caller's Mary Rooke, as well as author of The Choice, The Abortion Divide in America, Danielle D'Souza Gill. Mary and Danielle, welcome back to the show. Love having you both on. We got on Monday around midday some news about the James Comey and Letitia James cases, Danielle, and apparently there was a judge in South Carolina, Judge Cameron Curry, who was a Clinton-appointed judge. This will shock absolutely no one when you get the rest of it, who dismissed both of those cases, the cases that the DOJ has against James Comey and Letitia James, citing prosecutorial misconduct, Danielle. Apparently, this judge claims that Lindsay Halligan, who was going to prosecute this case, is a, quote, former White House aide with no prior prosecutorial experience, and because of that, does not feel that she legally, I guess, should have been in this position. So what we see here is that it's not based on any sort of allegations against them. There is apparently no problem with the cases themselves. This seems, Danielle, like an attempt by this judge to do whatever possible to prevent justice from being served against these two individuals. And, of course, citing something as frivolous as, oh, well, I don't like the person who was appointed to prosecute it. Seems like a pretty typical move from the Democrats.
Absolutely. These judges who have become these radical, rogue, activist judges have been appointed by Democrats, and they are using their position as judges to really just use it as overreach, to basically use their position to completely abuse their power. And we're seeing that they're just saying that this is kind of their main tactic. And honestly, this is one of their tactics they're using to derail President Trump's agenda, even though he was, democratically elected and we have these majorities. These rogue judges are stepping in and making it so that it's much more difficult for us to get things done. And so we absolutely need to rein in these rogue judges, which is why we have to move forward with impeachment.
Well, the good news, I guess, Mary, is that both of these cases were thrown out without prejudice, which means, they're able to be prosecuted in the future, I guess, with a different, individual to prosecute them. If you ask Judge Cameron Curry, that was the main issue here. The case against James Comey, though, they had very limited time to actually get, there was a statute of limitations issue that was going to run out if they didn't, put forward the charges against him. So I guess that's the good news, that this is not over, because look, these things cannot go just by the wayside and we can say like, oh, well, it's too late. Let's just let it go then. That's not what we're doing here. This is a president who wants full transparency on everything, everywhere he possibly can. And if you did something wrong, and especially if you did something wrong and it injured the United States of America, you better be held accountable for it. And that's exactly what this president wants to see happen.
The left always talks about like saving democracy and my democracy and all of that. The functioning core part of having a healthy society is ensuring that people who do wrong are held to the same justice that everybody else would be held to if they acted the same exact way. James Comey is under these charges. We've all seen the FBI run rampant and all of the crazy things that he did, not to mention the fact of his bizarre behavior since he's been out of the FBI. Not that we can attack that with the legal system, but writing 86 in stones, on the sand, and all of this really bizarre anti-Trump behavior. He deserves to have his day in court. The American people deserve to see it. And so if I were the Trump DOJ, I'd be putting someone in immediately to start these cases right back up again. We cannot let this go down. And I'd call on Republicans, just like Danielle said, to start moving these impeachments forward, because if they're going to be honest about standing by Trump's policies and his agenda, the fact that every day I'm getting a notification from the New York Times about some judge stopping some order that Trump or his DHS or whoever has put in, that's an insane anti-democracy movement that they're all supporting if they are not going to move forward with these impeachments. It's making me mad. It's making just regular Americans mad. I can't tell you how many moms I talk to at school pickup that are like, did you see another judge did this? And I'm like, I have no answer for you. Republicans in Congress are doing absolutely nothing. They like to talk about it. They like to tweet about it. They like to stand in front of their podiums, but they're not doing anything to actually impeach them. So I would call on them to actually do the job of the American people that we put them there to do. So it's insane, but
yeah,
we need to get these cases moving forward immediately.
Yeah, because the reality is, you don't get this stuff straightened out now. It's gonna happen again in the future. You want to hold people accountable for this stuff. And, I just said, Danielle, this is a president who really wants transparency in all places, whether we're talking about our food supply, whether we're talking about what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania, that whole situation, or whether we're talking about Jeffrey Epstein. President Trump last week signed the bill to release all the Epstein files. Now, Democrats had this ability, Danielle, for 4 years under Joe Biden. And did you see anything come out then? I'll wait for everyone's answer on that. The answer is no, and you have to ask yourself why. I will say it was a near unanimous vote to get this bill on the president's desk. I guess maybe that's one thing that is bipartisan. However, some information that's come out on the other side of this, all being released is not good for some people, especially former Clinton Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, who resigned from both his OpenAI board seat over this, as well as from his teaching position at Harvard. Does not look great for him. And it doesn't look like a lot of Democrats maybe calculated this the right way whenever they got hysterical about President Trump and Republicans. We have seen so much released thus far, and now we're going to get all of it, Danielle. So I'm really curious to see what else happens after all of this. We know Hakeem Jeffries had to come out and have a statement or so about an email that was sent out apparently by a group that was working for his campaign, where they sent Jeffrey Epstein an email, Danielle, and they said, "Dear Jeffrey, we're thrilled to announce that we're working with Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, one of the rising stars in the New York congressional delegation. Give us a call if you would like to get involved with the dinner or would like to get an opportunity to know Hakeem better. He is an impressive guy who will be a progressive voice for New York politics for years to come." So at this point, by the way, Danielle, this message went to Jeffrey Epstein, who at the time of receiving it was a known convicted sex offender, having pled guilty in 2008 to soliciting prostitution from a minor. I don't know that the Democrats calculated this right, Danielle.
Well, absolutely, Laura. And it doesn't surprise me because the Democrats, they never cared about this Jeffrey Epstein issue before now. And I think that the Democrats think, oh, wow, this is something we can really somehow, use against the Republicans because they're in the minority right now. And so the only thing they can possibly talk about is something that they could maybe get Republican support for. And we know a lot of Republicans, of course, want transparency regarding the Jeffrey Epstein issue because we are, of course, completely against the kind of things he was doing. And yet we see Democrats are going to be the ones who are implicated in all of this. And Hakeem Jeffries should really be ashamed of himself. He should be embarrassed. And I think he's sidestepping in his interviews. He's, claiming like it's not a big deal. But no, I mean, Jeffrey Epstein was a fan of this guy. And so I think when we look at the Democrats, we're just going to see their hypocrisy in all of this because they never actually cared about this Jeffrey Epstein issue when Biden was president or before that when Obama was president. They never cared about it. They've all of a sudden decided they think it's important. But as we're seeing everything released and President Trump's transparency with it all, I think it just vindicates Republicans and is vindicating a lot of the people who have asked for the release of the files. And the Democrats are really left without any messaging. And so I think they're just holding on to this messaging because they have nothing else to go on right now.
Well, that's 100% true. We know they aren't doing anything to help America. They're fighting against the president, Mary, who is trying to do the right things for this country. And this is pretty much all they had. By the way, in that same email, the part that really made me laugh was whenever they referred to Hakeem Jeffries as, quote, Brooklyn's Barack. I found that really funny. And I think the president, he always turns out to be right. He said all of Epstein's friends were Democrats. Mary, apparently so. We know he had that picture, that really weird picture painting of Bill Clinton in like a dress, the whole thing, a little sketchy, a little weird. I just think that, hopefully we can get this out, get all the information out to the American people. And then as President Trump has said time and time again, don't get distracted by this, Republicans. Yeah. Get it out, put it out there. We want to make sure that everybody has transparency here. And then let's get back to work. Let's make sure we're doing things that actually matter to the American people. Right now, we're in the holiday season. This president has worked very hard at getting inflation down. It has dropped significantly from the beginning of the year, but we want to get that down to everyday Americans and make sure people can feel it. Get back to doing those things. Don't get, bogged down in all this nonsense, Mary.
Brooklyn's Barack. I mean, Hakeem Jeffries is one of the most boring public speakers
he really is
ever witnessed. I was watching him speak the other day, and the whole time I'm thinking to myself, this is like watching paint dry. It's awful. I don't see how people vote for him or how he gets, any type of donations coming through. I think the thing to focus on with this is that Democrats are going to be grasping at straws. Every single time there's something that's released on here, they always try and grab at it and push it back to Trump or connect some sort of Republican to Jeffrey Epstein. Now we have an email stating, you're friends with Hakeem Jeffries. Come and help him, support him, do all of these things. Meanwhile, at the same exact time, you have Trump kicking Jeffrey Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago, making him persona non grata, and you can't escape that reality. But then you have people like Jasmine Crockett who will sit on the House floor and claim that Lee Zeldin all of a sudden has money coming in from Jeffrey Epstein, but it's the wrong Jeffrey Epstein. But she's allowed to go on CNN and be like, well, I made sure that my words were very clear here, that it could have been a Jeffrey Epstein. I wasn't the Jeffrey Epstein. And then, the host is sitting there going, but you definitely implied that it was the Jeffrey Epstein.
And who gives a crap, Mary, about some other Jeffrey Epstein? No one cares about it.
That's exactly the point. So the Democrats are going to spin their wheels for the next 6 months and try and entangle themselves in this Jeffrey Epstein business. So what Republicans need to do while that's happening is, like you said, work on affordability. The American people are still suffering You can see it in polling. The numbers look good on paper, but everyday kitchen items are still expensive because it's been expensive for a long time, and people are still feeling that. And so while inflation is down, they're like, yes, but prices are still up from 2019. We need to get back to that type of affordability level. And so when we're talking about this stuff, this is the perfect time for Republicans to put their head down. Don't wait in the muck. Let Democrats do that and get to the work for the American people, so that when November comes along, American voters are like, they didn't wait in the BS. They didn't sit there and they didn't play like, you were friends with Jeffrey Epstein. No, you got money from them. Instead, they were like, hey, guess what? I can afford my turkey dinner so much easier this year than I could last year, and the year before, and the year before that.
Yep. When you're filling up your gas tank, when you're at the grocery store, when you're paying your utilities, no one cares about Jeffrey Epstein. Okay,
Absolutely.
It's just
as horrific as the allegations and all of his stuff that he did. We care about the victims and all of that stuff, but I could not agree with you more. All of those social issues fall by the wayside. Abortion, transgender, parents' rights, all of that stuff fades away when people cannot afford to live.
Yep, that's the bottom line. Well, somewhere they're having a struggle getting by is out in California. I'll tell you that. I was out there last week, and I got to meet a lot of very interesting people. Before we get to the governor's race out there, because I do want to talk about that for a moment, I got to sit down and do Bill Maher's podcast show, Club Random. Yes. So here's the interesting thing. So I sat with Bill Maher for probably an hour and 20 minutes or so. It was a very long sit down. And I got to say, he's sick of the craziness, too. That was the common theme. Look, we went back and forth on a couple of things. We butted heads on things. The things that got me, though, Bill, were like he was upset about Russia collusion still. And I'm like, you're still hanging on to Russian collusion, Bill? Are you kidding me? So we had some conversations. But the interesting thing was how sick of the woke ideology and nonsense Bill Maher is. And Danielle, you kind of see that out there in interviews with him. I mean, he'll have these moments of kind of like agreeing with Republicans and conservatives on his show. He'll do, these monologues, like he did one on Friday night where he talked about how he's sick of people saying, I'm not going to go to Thanksgiving with my family who voted for Trump. He's just like, enough of that stuff. The one thing I will say I took away from sitting down with him is that this is what we should be doing more of. This is the kind of thing Charlie Kirk wanted more of. We need to sit down and we need to talk to one another. And we are able to disagree about things, have a conversation about them. He tells me his side, I tell him my side, and then we move on and we talk about other stuff. Guess what, Danielle? Everyone can do that out there. We're coming up on Thanksgiving this week. We're coming up on Christmas and the holiday season. We need to be doing more of that. And I really appreciated him having me out there and the conversation and his willingness to be honest because, man, it's tough to come by these days, Danielle.
Absolutely. And I really do credit President Trump with moving the Overton window with all of this, because when I think back to 2015, 2016, I feel like it was so much more challenging to kind of voice your opinions very publicly that are more conservative, because we were so used to conservatives being censored, and we were so used to kind of oh, we just won't mention our political views even to a family member at Thanksgiving.
Just fully shunned by everybody.
Yeah, fully shunned, especially, if you're in any kind of liberal state or liberal city. But I think the Overton window has shifted, and more people have felt confident to say, no, I actually do agree with Trump on this, or maybe I'm conservative in this way. Maybe you're not conservative on every single thing, but we are having so many more classic Democrats, Bill Maher type people saying this is crazy, whether it's transgenderism or whatever it is. And so I feel like now it's no, actually we are widely seen as the party that's way more open, way more welcoming, way more cool and normal. And the other side is very much shutting down conversation. They're the ones who are going to be, mad at you at a Thanksgiving dinner or whatever. So I think Bill Maher recognizing that and having more people who are kind of just culturally more on the left, kind of leaning to the center, is good for the country. It means that there's going to be less violence, less of these, radical, crazy people kind of just hating someone on the other side. And that is overall great. Obviously, Bill Maher probably disagrees with us on a lot of things, but I feel like we need to move to having a more cohesive country where we can get along and have family conversations and disagreements.
Yeah, there was once upon a time, Mary, where we didn't sit down at the Thanksgiving table and even think about somebody's politics. We used to not even talk about it. People were just sort of oh, yeah, I think this person voted for this president. But it's all different now. And what was interesting to me sitting down with Bill Maher was he acknowledged, he was listen, I'm going to get shit from people for this. Having you on this show, agreeing with you on some of this stuff, having a conversation, people are going to give me a hard time. The liberals are going to be furious with me. And I guess I've seen a little bit of the aftermath of our interview being public. And I guess they're very upset about it. But it is kind of scary to think that that's a place we're in now, that just having someone with a different political viewpoint sit down with you will get people so triggered. I mean, that's how we got into this awful place with Charlie Kirk at all, because 100%. People couldn't stomach the idea of engaging with the other side.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's actually a pretty scary point where we are, because you have, factions of the right where we're saying to each other, we understand what the left wants to do to us. We understand that they want to hurt us, and that, you have sitting people in Congress saying you have to pick a side. And you have to do these things, and we're pitting each other against civil to the Civil War. It's kind of a very scary thing to raise children in a society where, because of what I do for my job or my political views, all of a sudden that means that my children are a target or my husband's a target, and all of these things. That's the reality of where we live, where we would never do that to them. We're willing to sit down with people that have abhorrently different views than we do, just to have this conversation move forward. And Charlie was the number one person that kept saying the moment we stop talking is the moment that violence begins. And that, very poignant the way he was killed, why he was killed, because he was speaking, because he was telling the truth as he believes it and as we believe it. And I think the scary point is that the Democrats, even though they see the violence rising, they haven't stopped. They continue to double down. It's when we talk about them going up and saying, don't follow lawful orders. But then for the last 6 months, all they've said is every military order that Trump has given is unlawful. Mm-hmm. And so you sit back and you go, okay, so that means that you have a swath of the military, if they agree with you, are going to now stop following the commander-in-chief of the army. That's suicide.
Yeah.
That's, societal suicide. You have these people that are willing to go up and do their version of honor killings in the United States. I think that the only way back is through. I know a lot of people say that, but we have to push forward and continue to have these conversations. We can never stop. They're so important, sitting down with people like Bill Maher, who I would argue has come so far center.
Yeah.
I mean, he on his show the other day, someone was arguing with him about when Trump said whether it was Peggy or Piggy, and she was giving him a hard time about it, and he was like, excuse me, I have a piece of paper with a list of like 48 insults that Trump has given me, and I had him sign it, and I've got it framed, because that's reality. I'm willing to sit down with someone who's insulted me, because these conversations are so important to get to know the person and to get to know the ideals behind the policy. So it's great.
It's so funny. I was going to say, the way that I think we need to start handling this is more like Bill did, which is right there. It's literally right beside his seat on his Club Random podcast. He's got the framed picture, and it's got all of these, low IQ, the ones he's all put out there, all the things about Bill Maher that my father-in-law has ever said, and he's held back absolutely nothing, as you can imagine. And Bill brought it to the White House with him, and he had the president sign it. And I was like, you know what? What a great way to operate. What a
Full transparency.
It's the real, that's the way we ought to be doing these things. People are so triggered. They're so sensitive and all of that stuff. And anyway, I appreciated very much sitting down with Bill. Thank you for having me, Bill. It was great. It was a great experience. But listen, being out in California, I'm always reminded how great the state of California is. And I say it every chance I get. It is so beautiful. It's such a cool state. It's just run so poorly. So I sat down with Sheriff Chad Bianco, who is actually right now the front runner. He's leading the pack in terms of, running for the governor out there in California. And he's leading, well-known Democrats as well. He's at like 13%, I think, right now. But somebody couldn't help himself. If you thought it couldn't get worse than Gavin Newsom, just wait, because Eric Swalwell, Danielle, has decided he's going to throw his hat in the ring. He's going to run for governor of California. My God, these poor people need a reprieve out there. I think that's why the conservative sheriff is polling as high as he is. And in an interview that Eric Swalwell did over the weekend, one of the things he said that he really feels strongly about is that he says, I want us to be able to vote by phone. If we can do our taxes, make our healthcare appointments, essentially do your banking online, you should be able to vote by phone. Okay, I'm so sorry. As the former RNC co-chair, this is the dumbest, worst idea I could ever possibly imagine. You know where we should be voting? We should be voting at polling locations. We should be voting on election day. We should be voting on paper ballots. This is ripe for voter fraud. I can't imagine, Danielle, why Eric Swalwell would possibly want to vote by phone there in California for the governor's race.
Yeah, he's honestly such an embarrassment. I think that the fact that he's even saying these things is embarrassing for his own party, because we know the Democrats, they love voter fraud. They love illegals here because they love the idea of these people potentially voting in their elections. California, it has so many conservatives. It would never be as, represented by so many Democrats if it weren't for fraud. And yet we see someone like Swalwell basically saying this out loud, basically saying, hey, if we just vote on our phones, if we just kind of do this, how many illegals have phones? Pretty much everybody. Many homeless people have phones.
Right.
And so if people are just voting on their phones, who knows whether you should even be eligible to vote? Who knows if you're even of age to vote?
Who knows who you are? How do you prove who you are?
Exactly. So him proposing this, it's not serious. It's not something that is like an actual, he's like running for governor. This is very unserious of him. And yet when I think about it, though, that is kind of what the Democrats want. So maybe that's an appealing thing for him to say when he's running in a Democrat primary or something. But I absolutely don't think he is going to be a front runner, even for the Democrats, because he's been horrible in the House. He has, basically is known for his relationships with a Chinese spy. He's not a serious person, and he's honestly just very embarrassing for them to even be running.
Yeah, he also led the charge for the Russia collusion hoax and was out there front and center with Adam Schiff every chance he got to say that they had all of the material that would prove that Donald Trump colluded with Russia, which I guess maybe they got to Bill Maher about. I don't know. But this guy is absolutely terrible, and I hope Californians are smarter than that, although somebody elected him. to their office. But, you know, it's funny because, Mary, when I sat down with the sheriff out there, I asked him, I said, listen, Katie Porter, who's running for governor out here, was asked a very simple question, which is, how is it that you plan to reach out to the people here in California who voted for Donald Trump, of which there were many? You know, Mary, that state is actually very red. We have the most registered Republicans in the state of California. We raised the most money from the campaign from the state of California. We sold the most merchandise to the state of California. A lot of Republicans there. So how are you going to reach out to those Trump people and Republicans? And of course, she got herself into a whole heap of a mess over her response and just poo-pooed the idea that she even needed to deal with any of them. She doesn't need them. So I asked the sheriff, how are you going to reach out to people who voted for Biden or Kamala Harris or Gavin Newsom? And he basically said that he has people come up to him every single day who are either independents or lean left, and they say they're sick and tired of how their state has been run. They're sick and tired of all of the social justice nonsense, the things that don't matter, their streets not being safe, everything in terms of prices being sky high out there in California, and they want somebody to come in and take care of it. They want to feel safe and secure in California. They want to know that they have somebody who's actually going to do the job, who's going to bring people back. My God, they've lost congressional seats because people have left that state. So it's very interesting whenever you talk to him. He is reaching out across the aisle. He's doing the opposite of Katie Porter, and he wants to make sure that he is the governor for every single person out in the state. So I think it's fascinating he's in first place right now, Mary.
Yeah, and you have to think to yourself, like, how scared the Democrats must be that they're bringing Eric Swalwell in to sub in for Katie Porter because Katie Porter has done such a terrible job.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's everything it's all self-inflicted, everything that she's done, from like abusing her staffers to freaking out on the journalist because she's asking just like regular everyday questions that you should have to answer if you're running for governor of a state. And people are thinking, okay, this is really wild. Do you know who we need to bring in here? Eric Swalwell to save the day. I mean, like, that's how bad of a state it is there. When you travel to California, like you said earlier, it's so beautiful. You can't help but see the beauty. And, you know, Mike Cernovich talks about this a lot. He's like, gives a lot of people online flack because everybody's like, well, California is like so gross and all these things. He's like, no, it is one of the most beautiful states in the 50 United States. And I will, as a Texan, I don't believe that. I am always going to be pro-Texas, and this is the most beautiful state, so I won't hear any of that. However, traveling to California, you can see it. But when you go into these major cities like LA and San Francisco, you look at it and you're like, it is so mismanaged. The beauty is just being sucked out of it. It's like the life is being sucked out of California. So I'm hoping that these Republicans, like, you know, the conservative sheriff will come in and say, listen, I see the beauty. Let's help recapture it. Let's come back into the middle. We don't have to be, you know, as far conservative as, you know, that makes you uncomfortable, but let's get our education back online. Let's clean our streets. Let's make it safe again for you to be able to go out shopping with your friends and with your family and all of that stuff. Let's make it more affordable. I think that that's the smartest way to do it, other than Katie Porter and Eric Swalwell, who's like, let's pick up our phones. Not to mention the fact that you have illegal immigrants who can get the real ID in California and it's like a proven fact that they have. So how are they going to prove that an illegal immigrant is not voting in the election over there in California? It's insane.
Yeah, that's another thing that the sheriff talked to me about, was securing their elections out there. I'll tell you what, that is one thing I learned last year too. Those elections in California are wild. It is. Yeah. It is the wild, wild west out there. It's crazy. They got to rein that in. They got to figure that out a lot. You know, speaking of affordability out there, I went to get a smoothie with my producer out there. 2 smoothies cost us $43. Okay, I'm just gonna. This is.
Did
California.
You go to Erewhon?
Yes.
Did you go? Yes. They're so expensive.
She got the Hailey Bieber smoothie. I got the Gary Brecka smoothie. Now let me tell you something. The smoothies were delicious. Were they $20 smoothies? I don't know about that. I mean, I'm trying to think, what the heck are you putting in these that's costing this much? This is wild. But we had to try them, so we did a little social media thing for my show with it. But that's what you get out there in California, $43. I don't know how you live out there on you must have to make $1 million a year just to break even, just to afford a general basic life out there. It's nuts. But yeah, we gotta get California back on the right track. We gotta make sure that we're we're bringing it back because it's a great state. I absolutely love California, and we're gonna hope for the best out there. Before we go, here's something that I thought was very interesting. There are fewer high school girls who want to marry than boys. This is a Pew Research Center report, Danielle. They say that the share of 12th graders who say they plan to get married has declined precipitously among girls, and fewer of them are interested in having children too. Now, this is a big problem because we know Elon Musk has talked about the fact that our population is declining. We have to keep up with it. Eric always gets on me about the fact that we only have 2 kids, not 3. He's like, we only accounted for ourselves. We didn't have another one to add to the population. He's still on this train. But it is very interesting to think about the girls and how this has impacted them. This is not good news. When broken down by gender, more boys, 74% of them, than girls, 61% of them, said that they are likely to get married. So 74% of boys want to get married. Only 61% of girls want to. And if you compare that to numbers 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 83% of 12th grade girls said that they would like to get married someday. So that decline is from 83% to 61%. This is scary stuff. And Danielle, I wonder if this is as a result of so much being pushed out there towards these young girls saying, you know what, marriage and children are just going to get in your way. If you believe you're a strong woman, you go after that career. Don't get bogged down in the marriage and the kids and the whole thing. That is a really sad statistic, because what happens oftentimes is that you see these women who wait until they're like 40, and then they scramble around. They're like, oh my God, is it too late? Now I want to have kids. Now I realize why I should have done this. I don't know. We've been teaching these kids the wrong thing. That's a scary study.
Yeah, it's truly horrifying, because honestly, I feel like the old stereotype was like, oh, the woman wants to have kids. The guy's like, hold on.
Yeah.
It's like, focus on work a little bit first, and then I'll be stable and we'll have kids or something. But that is completely reversed. I mean, men have largely stayed the same. If you look at that study you mentioned, I think there was like a 2% difference with men from then to now. So the men, they're basically both times like, yeah, we want to have kids. They're, I think, in the majority. But then the women, it's dropped like at least over 20 percentage points down. And so now today it's the woman who's like putting the brakes on, who's like, nope, don't want to have kids yet. Maybe don't ever want to have kids. Maybe don't even want to get married to you. And so I think that this feminist culture has just seeped so deeply into media, into all of the things that women consume, and has basically inculcated their minds to the point where they think, wow, like that's a negative on my life. Like that's a burden on my life. It's a strain on my life that's going to prevent me from kind of being this kind of successful woman or whatever it is, even though they're, of course, amazingly successful women like yourself, who's a mother and stuff. But I think, they've kind of been stripped of the joy of what motherhood is and what children are. And I feel like you have to see that. You have to see that like with your friends or at church or whatever it is, to be like, oh my gosh, this is this adorable baby. Like I want one of those too. And see that there's just so much beauty that comes from motherhood too, and not just all the negative, all the downside stuff that the feminists and the left talk about. Because yeah, it is hard raising kids, and it is a sacrifice to raise kids, but there's also like this beauty that comes from motherhood and this joy from family life. And so I feel like men know that, hey, like this is why I work. This is why I work hard and I want to sacrifice for my family. It's because I have a wife and kids, not just to go buy stuff. But then for women, they're kind of losing the beauty of the motherhood side. And so I really feel like we need to champion motherhood more and talk more about marriage and important things like that, because otherwise the women, they're just going to put the brakes on it, and the men are going to be like, wait a second, I do want kids, and women are just going to be like, no.
It's really, it's so sad to me, Mary, this whole thing, because I agree, Danielle, with what you said. I think that there's been this infiltration of this feminist ideology to tell young girls you shouldn't want this, that you're weak or something if you want this. I will tell you, and I say this all the time, of all the titles I have ever had or will ever hold in my life, no matter what they may be in my future, the most important one is mom. And I had to be a little bit pushed into having kids by Eric. We got married, and it was like the next year Eric was like, all right, well, we need to get going. And I was like, oh, I don't know. I feel like I want to work on me and blah, blah, blah. And everybody kind of, makes you feel that that's how you should do it. On the other side of having kids, it is the greatest thing that I have ever done. There's nothing more important that I have ever done. And there's nothing more important that I will ever do than having my kids and raising them and making sure they're great human beings and they're contributing members of our society. But it's so sad to see that this is where things are trending and this is the direction that we've gone. You also look at this study, and I thought this was interesting as well. 46% of American adults are married today compared to 66% in 1950. So we know that marriage rates are declining. There are so many reasons for that. But, when you get to the end of a life and you talk to people who are old and kind of have lived their full life, and you say, what was the most impactful part of your life? What was the most important part of your life? They never say making money. They never say, having all of these, possessions and assets. They say it was the relationships. It was my family and the people who loved me and being around them and spending time with them. That's been the most important part of my life, an impactful part of my life. And unfortunately, there are going to be an entire generation of women who are going to get to the end of their lives and realize, oh my God, I got tricked. Somebody sold me a false bill of goods.
Yeah, I mean, look at the brand new song that Kelsey Ballerini just came out with.
Oh my God.
It's so tragic and heartbreaking. And she talked about it in an interview about how, she was sold this idea that she has to continue her career or, getting married and having kids was going to hold her back. And I would argue to look at people like myself who didn't even start writing until after I had all 4 of my children. And the only reason why I chose this career is because there were issues that were impacting my family directly. And I thought, you know what? I have 4 children. I have a voice. I have something to say. And let me just see if this works out. And it did. And it's great and all of those things. My children didn't hold me back. They were like a pedestal in which I jumped off of. And it's, the driving force behind me. I was talking about this with my husband the other day, where it's like, we talk a lot about how men need to slay dragons. They need to have something in their life that pushes them and, a goal to attain, something to fight for and against. And the most honorable fight that you can have is for your family. And it's so sad that you see that the men still get that. It's still inherently a part of that, but we beat this out of women so awfully with our entertainment, with what we told. I mean, that we have celebrities going on TV talking about how, I wouldn't have been able to create this movie had I not had the abortion, had I not, and it's so depressing, the breakdown of our society. And this study is the realization of that. If there's anything that we can do is we can sit our children down and tell them, you were worth everything. All of the sleepless nights, all of that stuff, you're worth it all, because yes, I did have to endure the toddler years. Yes, I did have to potty train all of you. Yes, we did have to go through these sleepless nights. And yes, you did take all of my makeup and write on the wall with it. Yes, all of those things did happen. And it was frustrating and annoying on that day. But the joy that you have brought my life, the purpose that you have brought my life completely dwarfs any of that stress and, any of those long nights. And I think that those conversations are so important to have with our kids so that they grow up understanding that they are worth it. I think a lot of this is, bitter motherhood that was born out of that feminist movement, where you see these women saying why would you have more than 2 kids? Why would you do this to yourself? You walk through the grocery store. I walk through the grocery store with 4 kids, and I get it all the time, where these people are like, oh, you have your hands full. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, my kids help me with the laundry. They help me with the kitchen. They help me do all these things because I've raised them well to do all of these things. And not to mention the fact that we're sitting here joking down the grocery aisle. You think that this is me having my hands full? What you should be saying is look at the joyful life that you have. You and your kids are laughing at the grocery store together. That's unheard of this day. So I don't know. I think these conversations need to be different. Polling is definitely showing what's, the rot in our society. And like y'all said, it's just so sad. I feel bad for Kelsey Ballerini. Every time I hear that song, my heart breaks. I think to myself, you've been lied to, and there's millions of American women. It makes me emotional because I know very many women like her that are looking back now and say, man, I wish I would have gotten married when you did. I wish I would have had children when you did. And, unfortunately, sometimes it's a little bit too late.
I know. Yeah. And I think we need to keep having these conversations and keep putting that messaging out for young women. And I know that was a big push of Charlie Kirk's. I know Erica is picking up that mantle and running with it and trying to get the message out to young Americans, because listen, you will never regret having a child, and this is, I sound like my husband trying to convince me, but you'll never regret it.
You're convincing yourself right now.
You will never regret it. It's the greatest thing. I use the same tactic on him with dogs. I'm like, you'll never regret, honey, if we get another dog. We have 3 dogs, so I don't know what that says about me. But it's a great thing, and I think we have to keep reaching out there to the young women and telling them it is not one or the other. You can do both. There are great examples of women everywhere who are able to be moms and are able to have a great career. And I would say having kids makes me better at everything that I do. I asked Caroline Levitt about this when I recently was interviewing her at the White House about being a mom in the role she's in. And she said, it makes me better at my job to be a mom. And so I hope young women out there hear that. And I hope we see this trend go back the other way, because it's so, so important. And I never want anybody to feel like that Kelsey Ballerini song. It's horrific. All right, Danielle and Mary, you guys are both awesome. Thank you so much for joining us here for another great episode of The Right View. To everybody at home, make sure you like, subscribe, share, and follow. We'll see you back here next time for more.